again, everyone. Thanks for joining us for Arkansas Week. We begin tonight with 135 districts, 35 on the Senate side, 100 on the other end of the Capitol. New districts coming. Michael Hiblin joins us, reporter for KUAR Public Radio in Central Arkansas. Price Dooley from the Political Science faculty at UCA, and Doug Thompson from the Northwest Arkansas newspapers. And thanks to everybody for coming in. Price, we do it every decade, once a decade. Some states could do it more often. We'll get to that in a minute. Yeah, but we do it anyway. Thus far, we've done it once a decade, and it's fingernails on a blackboard almost.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. Allegedly this is a process that's supposed to be a little less partisan with the governor and the Secretary of State and the Attorney General kind of meeting and holding public hearings to go ahead and divvy up the different state legislatures, but it's far from a non-political process. I think that the governor is basically saying that he's going to go ahead and he wants to release the maps to the public around July 29th. And so hopefully there are going to be some challenges relative to that, but we'll just say. I know Northwest Arkansas is having a few issues relative to that.
Oh, couple. Actually, I think we could probably boil it down to one, which is Springdale does not want to be split. One of the things that, in theory, redistricting is a real simple process where you make equal-sized districts, get the most proportional representation, one person, one vote. Unfortunately, what the other horse pulling this cart, so to speak, is that the incumbents don't want to run against each other, and they want to have districts that resemble their old district as much as possible. And they, if anything, they might want to remove some parts where they don't do well, and that's really hard to do in Northwest Arkansas. We're fortunate in Benton and Washington counties in that we've got almost exactly, perfectly the right number of people for 5 Senate districts, and this should be doable. The bigger shift, the more statewide important shift, is that this state is 175 years old, and for that entire time, rural lawmakers have dominated the state legislature. And the change, it's been a trend against that for practically all of our history, but it has just about reached the tipping point.
Well, as you know, we've watched this sort of evolve over the last 30, 40 years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It has been going that direction. It is absolutely going that direction. But like I say, it is finally reaching the tipping point. And they're not going to go meekly into giving up that power, nor should they. They have constituents to represent. They're sent to the Capitol to represent their people.
And then throw in also the added rise of the Republican Party in the state legislature,
exactly.
With holding 45 seats. And so it's interesting to see how the districts are going to actually pan out. Is there going to be enough overt gerrymandering of the districts to go ahead and try and keep this Republican tide in 2012 from actually manifesting itself? So I think you add that in with the rural district representation, and it makes for an interesting dynamic.
Well, overt or covert, it usually turns out to be very transparent.
I was about to say, I think I have a good answer to that question.
It doesn't say covert for very long.
There's a proposed district from the State Board of Apportionment staff that has Bill Pritchard from Elkins, John Burris, the House Minority Leader from Harrison, and Brian King, all in Carroll County, all in the same district. I mean, I'm sorry, you had to cast your net pretty wide to get to catch all those Republican fish.
Well, I mean, you've got that huge influx of or growth surge in population. That's going to happen.
Yeah,
Michael, we're at least making progress, or we're told we're making progress. You know, the maps are being
Yeah, we've had 7 hearings scheduled around the state. Most of those have happened by now. The final one is going to be about a week into July. And it's been a fairly quick process with the Attorney General setting a deadline of July 29th to vote on the proposed districts. He wants maps to be out there 10 days in advance of that. The meetings, as I've understood, have been relatively not very crowded, not bringing out a lot of public people. It's really an insider baseball process. Only these people who are really involved in it are actually taking part in these public hearings. But yeah, we should come to some kind of resolution by the end of next month.
On to another subject. There may, well, I don't know when it will be, and that's the resolution of all the chaos, the confusion, etc., in Pulaski County's 3 school districts. This is a statewide issue, as we frequently discuss here, because of the tens of hundreds of millions of dollars over the last
course of
20
years,
which have state dollars, extra state dollars,
since
which have flowed into segregation aid to those 3 districts. We now have a petition, and we're taping our broadcast at mid-morning on Friday. Heaven knows what will happen as soon as we go dark here. But there is now a petition before the Pulaski County before the State Education Department involving the Pulaski County School District, and apparently they're not taking it lightly.
Yeah, apparently we could decide. In fact, the Education Commissioner, Tom Kimbrell, said that he will likely have an announcement today whether or not to dissolve the school district, for the state to step in and take over. A lot of uncertainties. It's been bewildering watching the politics involved during this. After the losing the desegregation money, that's still being appealed, but a stay would not be issued while that appeal is pending. And if that does indeed stand up, a lot of money that the districts will lose in Pulaski County is trying to figure out how it will make up for that. But then you've got all the politics on board with the superintendent, firing vote earlier this week, which did not pass. Then you've got the principal who took early retirement after apparently being involved in a scheme to discredit another school board member. Just the drama with the Pulaski County
And a school board member
drama.
resigns. And
Yeah.
Well, let's break this up a little bit. I mean, we've now got the desegregation money, which involves the Little Rock, the North Little Rock, and the Pulaski County districts. That's an issue that involves all of them. But the Pulaski County Special School District, the one that the Board of Education is staring in the face right now, this is a district, this third largest district in Arkansas. It has 17,500 students in it. That is 50 times the size of the smallest school districts in Arkansas. We're talking, and they get state money just like everybody else on a per-student basis. They have enormous economies of scale. They have one of the best property tax bases in the entire state of Arkansas. And on top of that, they get these millions of dollars, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the figure. I think it's like 15 million, Little Rock. It's total 70 million a year. And it's been paid since 1989, which means the total payments to all 3 districts is $980 million or thereabouts. So they get this extra desegregation money, which we now know largely was not spent on anything specific to desegregation. It was spent on some pretty bread and butter things of any school district's budget.
And what you're referring to is a legislative audit report that excoriated the school district and showed that they woeful mismanagement of money, and looking at they really took the superintendent to task in terms of how he was spending his money.
Superintendent and the whole administration.
And the whole administration.
Governance, the board.
Governance then is completely. Basically, I guess what I'm saying is there is a precedent here to go ahead and they have a rationale to go ahead and not desegregate, but to go ahead and disband the board.
It could be just what the doctor ordered, quite frankly. Now, and then the Arkansas, it should be impossible for this district to be in fiscal distress.
And yet
Literally.
they are.
And yet they are. They had to work at it, and the State Board of Education has never, to their credit, their considerable credit, has never lightly put a district under state administration. But quite frankly, this is a challenge they might not be able to shrink from. And if this was a 500 student district somewhere up in the hills or somewhere out in the Delta, I'm not sure this decision wouldn't have already been made by
Well, let's assume for a second we're kind of operating in a vacuum here because we're waiting on the State Ed Department or the Commission to.
Yeah. To take action.
It does. Obviously, Michael, we lose the school, or it has the authority anyway to oust the administration, dissolve the school board, and run it from. Well, it's already in Little Rock, but I mean to run things.
Yeah.
For the near term anyway, pending reconstruction, so to speak, at least politically, of the district.
Incredible uncertainties right now, and what I really think about are the parents of these 17,500 kids. I mean, not knowing what things are going to be like, because if the order does hold and they do lose the desegregation money, they're going to have to be meeting every other day, I've heard, for the rest of the summer, trying to figure out what programs to cut. And they're going to have to cut a lot of programs, and that's going to have a big impact on the students.
Well, assume for a second, though, that not only does the district not lose the deseg aid, let's assume for a second that that aid is doubled. You still have a district that has existed for, since I've been in the news business, it has been one chaotic thing after another.
Which is what the state takeover is.
It's not alone in the state. Let me assure you, it's not the only district in the state that's had.
Right.
But
it's one of the biggest, and therefore is one of the biggest problems, quite frankly. And then let's make it clear here, we are talking about Pulaski County special. The only thing special about it is its size, quite frankly.
Well, it makes the Little Rock district look good. I mean, in terms of stability.
Okay, well, you got a point there. But seriously, state takeover is not a dreadful thing, quite frankly. I mean, it is, granted, I don't think the state's ever done anything, considered taking over a district on anything of this size or scale. I grant you that, but a couple of little school districts, or smaller school districts up in my neck of the woods that have been taken over by the state, emerged from it with on much sounder financial footing than they had been in years, and quite frankly with a lot more public support than they had had in years, because after it's all said and done, nothing makes you appreciate something more than losing it. Even temporarily.
There is another option too. I mean, the school district doesn't have to be taken over. It could just be disbanded completely, and then the different units could go and form with either North Little Rock or form their own. I mean, there are other options that the state Department of Education could actually utilize.
That's true.
On to another issue, and that's taxation. Sheffield Nelson said, wait a minute, I'm not through. Let's see if we can.
That was cold, Steve.
Yeah, I still think that severance tax is too low, and I'm going to do something about it, I think.
Yeah, looking at possibly putting this item before voters and now wanting even more money from the state, saying that money should also be going to cities and towns to make up for the road damage that's caused by all the heavy equipment that is rolling through these communities for natural gas drilling. So he would like to have an item on the ballot next year, getting even more money than he had originally been looking at.
Sheffield Nelson never struck me as a person who was a person who was willing to raise taxes. So it's a little odd to me. I thought he was sort of a conservative Republican, and from that standpoint, so this is sort of a head scratcher for me relative to going back and seeking an additional funding for against natural gas interests here in the Fayetteville Shale companies.
Mm-hmm. I
number of factors involved.
Yeah, I haven't got a real clear. He was former head of Arkla Gas. He'd had a long-running feud with the powerful Stevens family, which had gas interest, and which famously said, "Don't tax the gas under Grandma's biscuits," and such as that. And I'll put it this way: he is generally a anti-tax Republican, but he might have a personal blind side in this particular category. But let's not forget the underlying fact. All personalities aside, the severance tax in Arkansas is remarkably low. And quite frankly, there's mounting evidence that the damage done by the so-called fracking process is higher than anybody had ever considered before. In Pennsylvania and other states, it's become quite controversial what is done to the water table and what is done to, in addition to that, somebody buys a house out in the country for the peace and the quiet, and his neighbor, leases gas, he's going to hear a pump all night. Which hasn't gone over well with a whole lot of people. So it's got the bottom line is that the severance tax in Arkansas is still remarkably low.
The counter argument that to that though would be that with a low severance tax that does attract industry and business right to Arkansas. So if you raise it too high at some point, they might leave and go to greener pastures.
That's very true.
Still a lot of gas under that ground.
That's true. It's hard to get at, though, at this point. And we'll see if, frankly, the economy has got to pick up for this to be
on the demand side.
On the demand side.
That's the weak part.
Very weak. Very weak, especially compared to what it was a few years ago.
We have had some cattle shows, is the common term, of the prospective Republican presidential candidate. Announced or prospective, 2 or 3 or 4, but I think the one that got the most attention because it was nationally televised this past Monday night was the one on CNN in New Hampshire, first in the nation, New Hampshire, primary anyway. There were several possibles who weren't on that stage, but of those who did appear, they so enraptured a great many Arkansas Republican legislators that within 48 hours they were writing a letter to the governor of a neighboring state, who would be Mr. Perry of Texas. Run, Rick, run. Michael,
please.
What's going on?
Yeah, they sent this letter, Arkansans for Rick Perry. Already have a little letterhead there and a name. 20 lawmakers signing this, saying that basically they feel he is the best option. And a lot of these are folks who had supported Mike Huckabee and I guess aren't really enthralled with what they're seeing so far. And I guess New Hampshire didn't provide any reassurance. So they're encouraging Rick Perry to get into the race.
Why?
I think there is this.
What's missing from this field?
Anyone, I guess it's anyone but Romney. There's this movement relative, and I think in conservative circles, and so you have Romney, and then really 6 other hopefuls that aren't very well known and don't carry the same gravitas that a Rick Perry does. And so I think that's one of the issues. And here's the thing: I don't see how, I could be wrong, but I don't see how Mitt Romney wins the Republican nomination. He's not going to win Iowa. Probably Michelle Bachmann there.
Skipping that.
Yeah, he's skipping that completely. New Hampshire, he'll probably win that. Does he win South Carolina? No. Does he win the southern base, which is sort of the core component of the Republican Party? No. So a Rick Perry national name recognition, I think conservatives are trying to go ahead and draft him. So it's anyone but Romney more than anything, I think, right now.
Well, Perry's been pretty prominent with his faith, too, and has espoused a lot of things that the conservative Christian vote deeply appreciates. He is the longest-serving governor of in Texas history. I mean, he broke someone's record recently, but anyway, longest-serving governor in Texas history. And Texas has had huge budget problems, which, frankly, he's navigated pretty well. And he's done it by cutting spending, which further endears him to a lot of conservatives. So, and he's from the South. I mean, let's not ignore regional politics here. He's from the South. So you add all that together, and people like to talk about the weakness of the Republican field, and I'll grant you, I'm not real impressed, but people always talk about the weakness of the field. When George Bush was running for re-election, everybody talked about the weakness of the field, and Bill Clinton snuck up on him. So we'll see about that. But Rick Perry has a tenure as governor where his biggest single misstep was he was, however briefly, and he quickly backed off of it, said that Texas ought to have the right to secede.
Well, some of these he can expect. Let's say he goes the distance, or even in the other primaries. Some of those spending cuts that he made, he can expect to see those in 30s.
Yeah.
Grandma going over the cliff in the wheelchair.
Yeah,
Some
I think the best summary of the whole situation I've ever seen was in a political cartoon. I haven't had a chance to run yet. Pollster comes up and he asks about all these candidates. You know, which one do you support? Such and such as that, and the person leaning out of the door of her house is holding the classified ads and saying, "Well, it depends which one's hiring." Okay, the economy is the big issue in this race, and the fact that we have had chronic, persistent unemployment for a long time now.
Mr. Huckabee is said to have commented to someone who Governor Huckabee opted out of the race a month ago.
He has or he hasn't. We'll see.
Well, I mean, yeah, but he is said to have commented to someone, this is not a lay down. President Obama is going to be a lot more difficult to defeat than it looks like right now. He is the incumbent.
Yeah.
Incumbents can be defeated, of course. Bryce, what do you think?
Well, the president's going to raise anywhere from 800.
He won't get our 6, I know that.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
But he'll raise anywhere from $800 million to $1 billion in the upcoming election, and money is power in politics, and so that's awfully hard to beat.
Yes, it is, and he is still personally popular. Americans still like him. They don't think he's managed the economy very well. But quite frankly, I think the Congress has taken some of the hit for that. Frankly, a lot of the hit for that, and deservedly so. So perhaps he can. So perhaps he won't bear the full responsibility for the lousy state of the economy.
Everyone with the Mr. Romney is thought to be significantly unacceptable, if I can use that term, to a broad part of the Republican base. But who's running neck and neck with Mr. Obama? Who's the Republican who runs best against him?
Unfortunately,
right now, anyway, it's Mr. Romney.
Unfortunately, that doesn't matter. The primaries pick the candidates.
I understand, but what is the primary process likely to produce? Is it likely to produce a candidate, a nominee, who can get in there in the ring and with a good chance of
I will come right out and say it. Mr. Romney is running against the headwinds of a strong anti-Mormon prejudice, in my opinion.
Yeah, and to get a candidate out of the Republican primary who can appeal to a broad majority of Americans could be difficult. That's part of why these Arkansas lawmakers say they like Rick Perry, because they feel he could actually have broad appeal.
Mm-hmm. Bryce?
Well, there are 3 legs in the Republican Party. So you've got the Tea Party, you've got Republicans that are concerned about moral issues, and then physical issues. And Rick Perry does appeal to all 3 of those components in the Republican field. And Romney doesn't. You know, he's still viewed as a old traditional style Republican, old style Republican from the standpoint of New England Republican.
Main Street,
yeah, Main
Country
Street
Club.
Exactly. He doesn't really appeal to maybe one of those bases, but not the other 2. Plus, he has the albatross of basically putting forth a health care plan in Massachusetts that is much like President Obama's health care plan.
What was the strategy?
I was just going to say, and the biggest part of that albatross that the conservatives hate so much is it appears to work. Now, that's unforgivable.
Well, but yet Monday night nobody put a glove on Romney. Everybody thought he'd be used as a chew toy by the other candidates, and they just
don't have to put a glove. They don't have to put a glove on him. They're better off sending their own message. Quite frankly, they just why beat him up when he's not going to be? We're going to be struggling against that headwind anyway. That's just
Michael, thoughts?
Yeah, it will be tough, and we'll have to wait and see what happens. But indeed, watching the debate, it was surprising that there weren't more punches thrown. You expected some at this point, but it seems like candidates don't want to damage any of the other candidates at this point, because certainly in primaries, that's when you do a lot of damage that then has to be mended going into the general election.
Bryce, you get the last word tonight.
Well, Michelle Bachmann actually she rose. She really showed herself in the debates in New Hampshire. So I think it really helped her and boosted her chances actually of at least being a contender, the anyone but Romney candidate.
And with that, we're out of time. Gents, thanks to you for coming in. As always, thanks to you for watching. See you next week.
Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.